The alien distress call. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, countless civilizations thrived, connected by a complex network of alliances, trade routes, and communication relays. Among them were the Zephyrians, a peaceful race known for their advanced art and philosophy. One fateful day, the Zephyrian homeworld was attacked without warning by the ruthless Karnax Empire. The Karnax, a species driven by an insatiable hunger for conquest, unleashed their devastating weapons upon the unsuspecting Zephyrians. The planet's defenses quickly crumbled under the onslaught. In desperation, the Zephyrians broadcast a distress call on all frequencies, pleading for any civilizations to come to their aid. They knew they could not hold out alone against the might of the Karnax war machine. Light years away, on a small blue planet called Earth, the distress call was intercepted by the Global Space Agency. The revelation of intelligent alien life shocked humanity, but the species had long suspected they were not alone. An emergency meeting of world leaders was called to debate the Zephyrian plea for help. Some argued that Earth was not ready, that humanity should focus on its own problems. But others passionately maintained that to ignore the suffering of another species would be to sacrifice their very humanity itself. After much deliberation, a decision was reached. For the first time, humanity would step onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors, but as protectors and allies. The people of Earth would answer the distress call and rush to the defense of the Zephyrians. The first human expeditionary fleet would be assembled immediately. A new chapter for the human species was about to begin, one that would test their resolve, ingenuity, and courage like never before as they faced the flames of war against the dreaded Karnax Empire. Earth was about to show the galaxy what it meant to be human. Assembling the human fleet, the decision to aid the Zephyrians galvanized humanity into action with an urgency never before seen. The best and brightest from every nation poured their efforts into assembling the human expeditionary fleet. The most advanced ships humanity had ever constructed were pulled from research facilities and shipyards across the planet. Alongside the capital ships, swarms of agile fighters and bombers were produced in record numbers. Weapon systems, many of them experimental designs that pushed the boundaries of physics, were integrated and tested around the clock. Warp drives were installed in the ships, which would allow the fleet to traverse the vast distance to Zephyria in a matter of weeks rather than centuries. Teams of engineers worked tirelessly to increase their efficiency and stability for the journey into deep space. Meanwhile, a call went out for volunteers to crew the expeditionary fleet. It was a perilous mission from which many might not return, but millions of humans from all walks of life readily answered the call. Only the most elite soldiers, pilots, and specialists were selected. Many of these men and women said tearful goodbyes to their families, but a sense of pride and purpose shone in their eyes. They knew that the fate of not just the Zephyrians, but potentially the entire galaxy, could rest on their shoulders. Among both the crews and those seeing them off, there was a palpable feeling. This was humanity's destiny. As the ships took shape and the crews trained intensively, Earth's top scientists pored over the limited data humanity had on the Karnax. Physiologists studied their biology for weaknesses, engineers sought chinks in their technology, and tacticians formulated battle plans. No detail was too small to be examined in preparation. After months of tireless preparation, the human expeditionary fleet stood ready, a shimmering armada of sleek ships and elite crews, backed by the industrial and scientific might of a united Earth, a species which less than a century ago first contact. The human expeditionary fleet dropped out of warp on the fringes of the Zephyrian system, immediately greeted by a grim sight. Zephyria, once a verdant jewel of a world, now smoldered with the scars of orbital bombardment. Debris from shattered defense platforms and warships cluttered the space around the planet. The Karnax had already begun their assault. Sensor scans quickly located the remnants of the Zephyrian fleet, battered but still fighting desperately to defend their homeworld. The human ships moved to assist, their captains hailing the Zephyrian flagship. "This is Admiral Amarasalam of the Human Expeditionary Fleet, Responding to your distress call, the human commander announced, "We come in peace to aid in your defense against the Karnax." There was a moment of shocked silence from the Zephyrian ship. First contact with a new species was shocking enough, but to have that species appear in force to fight for their survival was almost beyond belief. "This is High Counselor Zinir of the Zephyrian Alliance," came the response, the voice trembling with a mix of gratitude and desperation. "Your arrival is a miracle beyond our wildest hopes. But I fear even with your aid, we may be doomed. The Karnax are relentless, and their technology is far superior to our own." As more Zephyrian ships gathered near the human fleet, the mood was indeed bleak. These were the survivors of a once grand armada, reduced to a mere fraction of their former strength. Many showed signs of heavy damage, and their crews radiated exhaustion and despair. Admiral Selim, her face a mask of determination, replied, "Do not abandon hope, High Counselor. Humanity is no stranger to facing overwhelming odds. Your distress call has brought the full might and ingenuity of our species to your aid. Together, we will find a way to overcome the Karnax." Over the next few hours, as the joint human-Zephyrian fleet established a defensive perimeter, envoys from both species met to confer. The Zephyrians shared all they knew about the Karnax, their brutal tactics, their fearsome weapons, and their seemingly unstoppable advance across the galaxy. The mood grew even more somber. The Karnax sounded like a nightmare made manifest, a species that existed only to conquer and destroy, armed with technology that surpassed even the most advanced Zephyrian designs. Many human officers privately wondered if even their cutting-edge ships and weapons would be enough. But as the briefing ended, Admiral Selim stood tall, her voice ringing with conviction. "We knew this would not be easy when we volunteered for this mission, but we also knew that we could not stand idle while another species faced annihilation. Humanity does not quit when the going gets tough. We adapt, we innovate, and we fight with every ounce of our strength and courage. That is what we will do here today." Her words seemed to ignite a spark in both human and Zephyrian hearts alike. Yes, the odds were daunting. Yes, the enemy was terrifying. But they would face this trial together, united in the cause of survival and freedom. The first meeting of two species, one answering the desperate call of the other, marked the start of an alliance that would be forged in the fire of war. As one, they turned their eyes to the stars, waiting for the Karnax armada they knew would soon darken the skies. Come what may, they would stand together, for Zephyria, for Earth, and for the future of the galaxy itself. Ingenuity and determination. In the days following the arrival of the human expeditionary fleet, a flurry of activity consumed both the human and Zephyrian ships. There was little time to waste. The Karnax armada was surely on its way, and every moment had to be spent in preparation for the coming battle. Teams of human and Zephyrian scientists and engineers worked around the clock, poring over the data on Karnax technology. The Zephyrians had managed to salvage some wreckage from previous battles, offering a wealth of information for the Allied forces to study. The Karnax weapons were indeed formidable, gigantic annihilator-class beams that could slice through the thickest armor like paper, dark matter torpedoes that could phase through shields to detonate inside ships, and null distortion fields that could warp the very fabric of spacetime around their targets. But as they studied these fearsome tools of destruction, the human scientists began to notice potential weaknesses. The gigantic annihilator beams required enormous power and had to recharge after each shot. The dark matter torpedoes, while devastating, were relatively slow and could potentially be intercepted. And the null distortion fields, though highly disruptive, had a limited range. Excitement grew as plans began to form. If they could find ways to exploit these weaknesses, they might stand a chance against the Karnax onslaught. Engineers proposed new shielding designs to counter the annihilator beams, while others worked on developing faster-than-light interceptor missiles to take out the dark matter torpedoes before they reached their targets. Meanwhile, human and Zephyrian soldiers trained together, sharing tactics and combat techniques. The humans were initially taken aback by the Zephyrians' lithe, almost fragile appearance, but they quickly learned not to underestimate their new allies. Zephyrian warriors moved with blinding speed and agility, their reflexes honed by centuries of martial tradition. As the two forces learned to work together, a plan began to take shape for the coming battle. They would use the Zephyrian speed and maneuverability to flank the Karnax armada, drawing their fire and creating openings for the human ships to exploit. In a surprising turn, it was a young human engineer named Lieutenant Kira Sato who proposed one of the most daring strategies. She had been studying the Karnax's null distortion fields intently and believed she had found a way to not just counter them, but to turn them against their creators. If we can modulate our shields to match the frequency of their distortion fields, she explained, we could potentially reflect the distortion back at their own ships. It would be like turning their own weapon against them. The plan was risky. It would require ships to get perilously close to the Karnax vessels, and the calculations would have to be perfect. But Admiral Salam, seeing the determined fire in Lieutenant Sato's eyes, gave the go-ahead. Every ship in the fleet was soon equipped with the new Sato shields. As the preparations continued, a sense of cautious optimism began to grow. Yes, they were still outnumbered and outgunned, but they were no longer fighting with outdated strategies and weapons. Human ingenuity and determination, combined with Zephyrian bravery and skill, had given them a fighting chance. And so, as the sensors finally detected the approaching Karnax armada, a resolute calm settled over the Allied fleet. The time for planning and preparation was over. The battle for Zephyria was about to begin, and with it, the fate of two species, and perhaps the galaxy itself, would be decided. The battle for Zephyria. The Karnax armada exited warp at the edge of the Zephyrian system, 1,000 ships strong, each one a bristling fortress of destruction. At their center was the flagship Inexorable, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even the largest Allied vessels. On its bridge, Karnax Warmaster Krenox surveyed the assembled forces of humanity and Zephyria with disdain. So, the cattle have found a new herd to join them, he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. No matter. They will all burn before the might of the Karnax Empire. As the Karnax ships advanced, the Allied fleet moved to meet them, the sleek human ships taking point, their hulls glinting with the new Sato shield emitters. On the bridge of the human flagship, the Defiance, Admiral Salam stood resolute, her eyes fixed on the viewscreen. All ships, prepare to engage, she commanded, her voice steady. Remember the plan. Zephyrian wings, commence flanking maneuvers. Human ships, prepare for close quarters combat. The battle erupted with a fury that lit up the stars. Gigantic annihilator beams lanced out from the Karnax ships, only to splash harmlessly against the new shielding of the human vessels. Dark matter torpedoes were met with swarms of interceptor missiles, detonating in spectacular fireballs. The Zephyrian ships wove through the chaos with impossible grace, their weapons slicing into the Karnax flanks with surgical precision. The Karnax, unused to facing such coordinated resistance, began to falter. But Warmaster Krenox was not so easily thwarted. With a roar of rage, he ordered the deployment of the null distortion fields, intending to crush the Allied fleet with a single devastating blow. As the distortion waves rippled out, the human ships charged forward, the Sato shields glowing with a brilliant blue light. Just as Lieutenant Sato had predicted, the distortion was reflected, slamming back into the Karnax ships with devastating force. Shields collapsed and hulls crumpled under the onslaught of their own weapon. Seizing the opportunity, Admiral Salam ordered the Allied fleet to press the attack. Human and Zephyrian ships surged forward as one, pouring fire into the disarrayed Karnax forces. On the bridge of the Inexorable, Warmaster Krenox bellowed with fury as his ships fell one by one. In a final act of desperation, he ordered the Inexorable to ram the human flagship, determined to take his enemies with him into oblivion. But Admiral Salam was ready. With a daring maneuver, The Defiance evaded the Inexorable's charge, letting the massive dreadnought overshoot. Before Chronox could react, a salvo of human quantum torpedoes and Zephyrian antimatter lances struck the Inexorable's unprotected rear. The mighty ship exploded in a blinding flash, taking War Master Chronox and his bridge crew with it. With the loss of their flagship and leader, the remaining Karnak ships fell into disarray. Some fled, jumping into warp in a desperate bid to escape. Others fought to the last, refusing to surrender. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. As the last Karnax vessel was dispatched and the Allied fleet began to regroup, a cheer went up from human and Zephyrian crews alike. Against all odds, they had triumphed. Zephyria was safe, the Karnax armada was shattered, and a blow had been struck for all free species of the galaxy. But even as they celebrated, the toll of the battle became clear. Many ships on both sides had been lost, and countless brave soldiers had given their lives. There would be time to mourn and honor their sacrifice. For now, however, there was also cause for hope. Humanity and Zephyria had fought side by side and prevailed. A new chapter was beginning, one of unity and shared destiny among the stars. Aftermath and new beginnings. As the echoes of the battle faded, the Allied fleet began the solemn task of recovery and repair. Rescue shuttles were dispatched to retrieve escape pods and stranded crew members, while damage control teams worked tirelessly to save crippled ships from the brink of destruction. On the surface of Zephyria, the human and Zephyrian ground forces began the process of rebuilding. Cities that had been reduced to rubble by orbital bombardment slowly came back to life as survivors emerged from underground shelters to start anew. In the midst of the aftermath, Admiral Solemn and High Counselor Zinir met once more, this time not as desperate allies but as victorious friends. As they survey the recovering planet from the Zephyrian High Council chambers, Zinir turned to Solemn, his eyes brimming with emotion. "Words cannot express the depth of our gratitude," he said, his voice trembling. "When we sent out that distress call, we never imagined that help would come, let alone that it would come in the form of such brave and selfless allies. The people of Zephyria will never forget what humanity has done for us." Admiral Solemn smiled, placing a hand on Zinir's shoulder. "We only did what we knew was right. When we received your call, we saw not just an alien species in need, but a mirror of ourselves, a people yearning for peace and willing to fight for their freedom. In coming to your aid, we found not just allies, but kindred spirits." In the days that followed, as the reconstruction of Zephyria continued, the story of the great battle spread across the galaxy. Recordings of the human ships in action, of Admiral Solemn's stirring speeches, and of human and Zephyrian warriors fighting side by side were broadcast on every civilized world. Humanity, once an unknown entity sequestered in their tiny corner of the galaxy, was now the talk of every spacefaring race. Delegations from 100 worlds arrived at Earth, eager to establish ties with this brave new species that had burst onto the galactic stage in such spectacular fashion. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchanges were initiated, and scientific collaborations were begun. Humanity, in the span of a single battle, had become a major player in galactic affairs. But it was the bond between humanity and Zephyria that shone the brightest. The two species, forged in the crucible of war, were now inseparable friends. Zephyrian students flocked to Earth to study human science and culture, while human artists and philosophers traveled to Zephyria to learn from their ancient wisdom. In a grand ceremony on Zephyria, attended by dignitaries from across the galaxy, a monument was unveiled, a towering statue of a human and a Zephyrian standing back to back, their weapons raised in a gesture of eternal vigilance. At its base, a simple inscription read, "In the face of annihilation, two species stood as one. Let their courage be a light to all who value freedom." As Admiral Solemn stood before the monument, surrounded by her crew and newfound Zephyrian friends, she couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, humanity had been alone, unaware of the wonders and dangers of the universe beyond their solar system. Now, they stood shoulder to shoulder with the citizens of the galaxy, ready to explore, to learn, and to defend the ideals of liberty and unity. She thought of the brave men and women who had given their lives in the battle against the Karnaks, and of the countless more who now served on the ships and stations that guarded the allied worlds. They were the best of humanity, courageous, compassionate, and unyielding in the face of adversity. They had shown the galaxy the true meaning of the human spirit. As the ceremony ended and the crowds began to disperse, Admiral Salam found herself approached by a young Zephyrian child. The girl looked up at her with wide, silver eyes, a small replica of the monument clutched in her hands. "Thank you," the child whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Thank you for saving us." Admiral Salam knelt down, taking the child's hands in her own. "We saved each other," she said softly. "In coming together, we found strength we never knew we had. Always remember that, little one. In unity, there is hope. In courage, there is victory." The child nodded solemnly, a smile spreading across her face. In that moment, Admiral Salam saw the future, a future where humanity and Zephyria, along with countless other species, would stand together as beacons of hope in a galaxy too often darkened by conflict and oppression. It was a future worth fighting for, a future that had been born in the fires of war, but would be nurtured by the bonds of friendship and trust. As the Admiral rose to join her comrades, she cast one last look at the monument, the metal figures gleaming in the sunlight. It was a testament to what had been achieved, and a promise of what was yet to come. The battle for Zephyria had been won, but the journey was only beginning. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe, and they would face whatever challenges lay ahead the same way they had faced the Karnaks. Together, united, and unafraid. So ends the epic tale of humanity's first foray into the galactic stage. Not as conquerors, but as defenders. It is a story that would be told and retold for generations, a shining example of the indomitable human spirit. And as the ships of the human expeditionary fleet set out once more into the vast expanse of space, they carried with them not just the hopes of Earth and Zephyria, but the dreams of a galaxy yearning for a new dawn.